Have you ever wondered if ancient humans cheated on their partners? Picture this. It's 30,000 years ago. There are no cities, and there are no laws. There are no weddings, and there are no dating apps. There isn't even a written language yet. There are only small groups of hunter-gatherers, struggling to survive another day. So here's the question. If there were no marriage rules at all, did people simply mate with anyone they wanted? Or did cheating already exist, long before civilization was even born? This isn't just a philosophical question anymore. Anthropologists, evolutionary biologists, and geneticists have spent decades studying ancient human behavior, and what they've discovered completely changes the way we think about love, loyalty, and relationships. Because the truth is, humans may have been cheating for tens of thousands of years, but probably not in the way you're imagining right now. Most people assume ancient humans lived at one of two extremes. Either everyone was completely faithful, or everyone slept with everyone. But nature rarely works in extremes like that. A hunter-gatherer couldn't survive completely alone. Finding food, protecting children, and defending against predators all depended on cooperation. That means relationships weren't just about romance. They were about survival. And survival changes everything. Here's something many people don't realize. For over 95% of human history, marriage didn't exist in the way we know it today. There were no official ceremonies, no legal contracts, and no wedding rings. Those traditions only appeared after agriculture developed around 10,000 years ago. Before that, humans lived in small bands of roughly 30 to 150 people. Everyone knew everyone else in the group. If someone betrayed the group, people noticed almost immediately. That social pressure alone could be more powerful than any written law. But here's where things get interesting. Even without formal marriage, people still formed long-term pair bonds. Why would that happen? Because human babies are incredibly helpless compared to most other animals. Unlike many animals that can walk within hours of birth, a human child needs years of dedicated care. One parent often wasn't enough to provide that. Two adults working together dramatically increased a child's chances of survival. So, evolution naturally favored partners who stayed together at least long enough to raise their children. But that doesn't automatically mean they stayed completely faithful. Here's where biology enters the story. Imagine you're living 40,000 years ago. Every decision you make affects whether your genes survive into the next generation. Evolution doesn't actually care about romance, and it doesn't care about weddings. It only cares about one thing: passing your genes forward. And sometimes that single goal creates conflicting strategies. A stable partner provides food, protection, and help raising children. But having children with someone who has exceptional strength, health, or stronger genes could also offer real evolutionary advantages. This creates a fascinating dilemma. Should you stay loyal, or should you seek out better genetic opportunities? If that sounds surprisingly modern, that's because our brains are still running on software designed for the Stone Age. So what actually happened back then? Did prehistoric humans secretly have affairs? Did entire tribes practice open relationships? Or were our ancestors far more loyal than we assume? The problem is that nobody left behind relationship diaries. No one carved "I caught my partner cheating" into a cave wall. So how could scientists possibly figure this out? The answer is genuinely astonishing. Instead of reading ancient love letters, researchers looked at something much harder to fake. They looked at ancient DNA. And when scientists began comparing genetic evidence with archaeological discoveries, they uncovered clues that had been hidden for thousands of years. Researchers extracted genetic material from ancient skeletons and compared it with the DNA found in nearby burials. This let them start reconstructing entire prehistoric family trees. Suddenly, people who had died thousands of years ago were no longer strangers. Scientists could identify parents, children, siblings, and even distant relatives, and what they found was genuinely surprising. In many ancient communities, men, women, and children were buried together as family groups. This suggested that long-term pair bonding wasn't just a modern invention at all. Stable family units had likely existed long before written history began. But then the evidence became far more complicated. When researchers compared the genetics of entire ancient communities, they noticed something unusual. Some children weren't genetically related to the man they appeared to be living with. Now, before jumping to conclusions, that doesn't automatically prove infidelity happened. The child could have been adopted, or a biological parent may have simply died. Families could have merged together after some kind of tragedy. Life in the prehistoric world was incredibly dangerous. Disease, accidents, animal attacks, and conflict were all constant threats. People often had to rebuild their families simply to survive. So DNA alone can't actually tell us that someone cheated. But it does reveal something important. Ancient families weren't always as simple as we like to imagine. If prehistoric humans left us few direct answers, maybe our closest living relatives could help instead. Chimpanzees and bonobos share around 98 to 99% of our DNA. And yet, they couldn't have more different relationship systems. Chimpanzees live in societies where females may mate with multiple males, and competition between them is intense. Bonobos, on the other hand, use social bonding, including sexual behavior, to reduce conflict and strengthen relationships. They come from the same family tree, but they follow completely different strategies. So which one are humans actually more like? The answer, surprisingly, is neither. Humans seem to have evolved something genuinely unique. We're capable of forming deep, long-term emotional bonds, while also still feeling attraction to other people. That specific combination is actually quite rare across the entire animal kingdom, and it may explain one of the biggest contradictions in human behavior. Now think about something almost everyone has personally experienced. Jealousy, it feels deeply personal every single time. But scientists believe jealousy itself may be an ancient evolutionary adaptation. If your partner invested resources in someone else's child, your own children's chances of survival could decrease. That made loyalty an incredibly valuable trait to have. Researchers have actually found that feelings of jealousy appear across cultures all over the world. Different languages, different religions, and different continents all show remarkably similar emotional reactions. That suggests jealousy didn't appear alongside modern civilization at all. Its roots may stretch back tens of thousands of years, long before governments, long before marriage licenses, and long before anyone had even invented the word cheating. Everything we've discussed so far points toward one conclusion. Ancient humans probably weren't completely faithful, but they also weren't living in a world of constant, casual relationships. Instead, their social lives were likely quite flexible. Different groups, different environments, and different survival challenges probably produced very different relationship patterns, which means asking did ancient humans cheat may actually be the wrong question entirely. Because before you can cheat on someone, you first need agreed upon rules to break, and that's exactly where the story takes an unexpected turn. Around 10,000 years ago, humanity experienced one of the biggest turning points in its entire history. We stopped wandering, and we started farming instead. At first, this looked like pure progress. People settled down, villages grew into towns, and towns grew into cities. But farming created something our hunter-gatherer ancestors had never really possessed before: property. Suddenly, there was land, animals, stored food, and real wealth to consider. And once people owned valuable things, a brand new question appeared. Who exactly would inherit all of this? For the first time in human history, knowing precisely who your biological children were became incredibly important. And that's the exact moment relationships started to change. Today, many people assume marriage has always been fundamentally about romance. Historically, that's really not true at all. In many early civilizations, marriage was just as much about economics, inheritance, and political alliances as it ever was about affection. Faithfulness suddenly carried much higher stakes than before. If inheritance depended entirely on biological descendants, then any uncertainty about parenthood could create major problems. This doesn't mean cheating suddenly began at this exact moment. Rather, its consequences became far more serious than they had ever been. In many societies, rules around sexuality grew stricter, and social expectations around loyalty grew stronger. What had once been a primarily personal relationship increasingly became a formal social institution. So, did ancient humans actually cheat? The honest answer is almost certainly yes, but probably not in the simple way we tend to imagine today. There's no evidence that every single prehistoric society followed one universal relationship system. Some groups likely practiced long-term pair bonding, while others allowed for much greater flexibility. Human societies have always been remarkably adaptable, which is one of the reasons our species managed to spread across almost every environment on Earth. The idea that all ancient humans were either perfectly monogamous or living in complete sexual freedom is almost certainly too simplistic. Reality was probably somewhere in between, just as it often still is today. One of the biggest misconceptions about evolution is the idea that it tells us how we should behave. It really doesn't work that way. Evolution can explain why certain behaviors may have developed over time, but it never decides what's actually right or wrong. Our brains evolved under survival pressures that lasted for hundreds of thousands of years. Modern society, though, is completely different from that ancestral world. We live with laws, cultures, religions, personal values, and conscious choices that go far beyond raw biology. In other words, having an evolutionary tendency doesn't mean we're controlled by it. Humans aren't simply slaves to their instincts. Maybe the most fascinating discovery here isn't actually whether ancient humans cheated. It's that for tens of thousands of years, people were already dealing with many of the same emotions we experience today. Love, jealousy, trust, attraction, loss, and hope were all already part of the human experience. The world around them looked completely different from ours, but the human mind itself may have been surprisingly familiar. So the next time someone confidently claims ancient humans were naturally monogamous, or that our ancestors never stayed loyal to anyone, remember the evidence simply doesn't support either extreme. Human history isn't black and white. It's wonderfully complicated instead. And maybe that's the most human thing of all, because whether you're standing beside a campfire 40,000 years ago, or scrolling on your phone tonight, relationships have never really been simple. They've always been part biology, part culture, and part conscious choice. If this video changed the way you think about human history, subscribe for more science-backed stories like this one. And here's a question for you. Do you think humans are naturally monogamous? Or do you think culture shaped most of our relationship rules? Let me know in the comments below, because I genuinely read as many as I can.